Flabbed. They sold my daughter's treasure for 165 zalozu, but they had no idea what it was really worth. Flabbed. The day I found out my parents sold my daughter's rare book collection, something inside me broke in a way I didn't know was possible. Flabbed. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just betrayal. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and torn out every memory, every late night. Flabbed. Every whispered dream my little girl had ever shared with me. And the worst part, they didn't even think they did anything wrong. Flabbed. It started with silence. My daughter, Lily, was 13 when she fell in love with rare books. Not fairy tales from the bookstore. Flabbed. Not colorful paperbacks. She loved old books. The kind that smelled like dust and time. The kind that had signatures from authors long gone. Flabbed. The kind people locked behind glass. I still remember the first one she bought. It was a small, flabbed, worn-out first edition of a classic novel she had saved her allowance for months to buy. She held it like it was a newborn baby. Flabbed. Dade, she whispered that night, when I touch it, I feel like I'm touching history. Her mother passed away when Lily was 6. After that, flabbed, books became her safe place. When the world felt too loud, too cruel. Flabbed. She would sit in the corner of her room with one of her treasures and disappear into another time. I supported her hobby the best I could. Flabbed. I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations. Every birthday and holiday, instead of toys or gadgets, she asked for rare books. Slowly, over 7 years, flabbed. Her collection grew. It wasn't just valuable in money. It was her heart. Last summer, I had to travel out of state for 3 weeks for a contract job. Flabbed. It was the kind of opportunity I couldn't refuse. It meant stability for us, security, a better future. Flabbed. My parents insisted Lily stay with them while I was away. They're just books, my father had once said when he saw her room. Flabbed. She should focus on real things. I ignored the comment. I shouldn't have. 3 days before I was due to return home, Lily called me. Flabbed. She wasn't crying. That scared me more. Dad, she said quietly, Grandma and Grandpa had some people come to the house. They took my books. Flabbed. My heart dropped. What do you mean took them? They said they sold them. They said it was for my future. Flabbed. I remember sitting down on the edge of a hotel bed, unable to breathe. When I got back, Lily's shelves were empty. The glass cases were gone. Flabbed. The temperature-controlled cabinet I had saved for months to buy was missing. It looked like she had never loved books at all. Flabbed. My mother greeted me calmly, almost proudly. You're welcome, she said. We sold that junk for $165,000. Flabbed. Can you believe someone would pay that much for old paper? Old paper. Lily stood behind me, her face pale. She hadn't cried. Not once. Flabbed. She just looked hollow. My father explained they had contacted an auction house. Apparently, flabbed, several of Lily's first editions were far more valuable than we realized. A signed copy from a legendary author. A limited print run from the 1800s. Flabbed. A rare manuscript with handwritten notes. They said they put the money into an investment account under Lily's name. Flabbed. You should be thanking us, my mother added. Now she has a real future. College paid for. Maybe even a house someday. I turned to Lily. She whispered. Flabbed. Dada, they sold Mom's book too. I felt the world tilt. Her mother's book. Before she passed away, Lily's mom had given her a rare poetry collection. Flabbed. It wasn't just rare because of its edition. It was rare because inside the cover, she had written a letter. A letter Lily read every birthday. Flabbed. Every Christmas. Every night she missed her. That book was never meant to be sold. It was never meant to leave our family. I asked my parents where it went. It was part of the lot. My father said casually. Everything went. Everything. I wanted to scream. Flabbed. I wanted to break something. But Lily was standing there, small and silent, watching me. So I swallowed my rage. That night, flabbed. Lily didn't come out of her room. The next morning, I drove straight to the auction house. I begged for information. I explained the situation. Flabbed. I told them one specific book was stolen property. That it had personal documents inside. They told me it had already been sold to a private collector. No name, no address. Just sold. I felt hopeless. For weeks, Lily barely spoke. She stopped reading. She stopped smiling. The spark in her eyes was gone. Flabbed. I realized something then. My parents hadn't just sold books. They had sold her sanctuary. One night, I knocked on Lily's door. I sat beside her and said, "We're getting it back." She looked at me for the first time in days. "How? It's gone." "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're not giving up." Flab, I posted online. I reached out to rare book forums, collectors groups, social media communities. I told the story. I didn't attack my parents. Flabba, I just told the truth. About a little girl who lost her mother. About a poetry book with a handwritten letter inside. Weeks passed. Then one evening, flabbed, I got an email. A man had seen my post. He believed he had purchased that exact poetry collection at the auction. My hands shook as I called him. He was older, soft-spoken, a lifelong collector. He described the book, the edition, the inscription inside. It was hers. I expected negotiation. A price. Flabbed. Maybe even a demand for more than we could afford. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. When I read the letter inside, he said gently, "Flabbed, I knew it didn't belong to me." He told me he had a daughter once. She had passed away years ago. He understood what that letter meant. "I would like to return it," he said. "No charge." I couldn't speak. I just cried. A week later, the package arrived, flabbed. When Lily opened it and saw her mother's handwriting, she broke down for the first time since everything happened. Flabbed. She clutched that book to her chest and sobbed. Not quiet tears, healing tears. But that wasn't the only surprise. The collector included something else. He had quietly contacted other buyers from the auction. He told them the story. Not all responded. But some did. Over the next 2 months, pieces of Lily's collection started coming back. Not all of them. But enough. The rare manuscript. The signed first edition. Several irreplaceable volumes. Some collectors refused to sell. Some demanded high prices. I used part of the $165,000 to buy back what I could. Flabbed. In the end, we recovered nearly half of her original collection. But something had changed. Flabbed. Lily no longer saw the books as fragile treasures that could be taken away at any moment. She started a blog. She shared her story. Flabbed. She began speaking about the emotional value of passion. About how adults sometimes confuse money with love. Her story spread. Publishers reached out. Flabbed. Book communities invited her to speak. At 15, she was giving talks about preserving history and respecting children's dreams. And the biggest twist. Flabbed. That investment account my parents created grew over time. Combined with scholarship offers Lily earned through her growing influence. Flabbed. She didn't need most of that money for college. Instead, at 18, she used a portion of it to open a small rare bookstore. She named it after her mother. On opening day, my parents showed up. They looked older. Smaller somehow. My mother walked up to Lily and said, "Flabbed. We thought we were helping." Lily looked at her calmly. "You were helping the wrong thing," she replied softly. There was no anger in her voice. Flabbed. Just truth. Years later, I sometimes stand in the corner of that bookstore and watch my daughter talk to customers. Flabbed. She still holds rare books like they're alive. She still smells the pages. She still smiles the same way she did at 13. Flabbed. But now she understands something deeper. Value is not always measured in dollars. Some things are priceless because they carry love. Memory. Identity. Flabbed. My parents sold her collection for $165,000. But what they almost destroyed was worth far more than that. They taught us a painful lesson. Flabbed. And in the end, that lesson built something stronger than any collection ever could. Because you can sell paper. You can sell ink. Flabbed. But you can never sell the meaning written between the lines. And even after the bookstore opened. Flabbed. Even after the shelves were filled again with stories that smelled like time and dust, the scar never completely disappeared. Flabbed. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It just teaches you how to live with it. Flabbed. There were nights when I would see Lily sitting alone at the counter after closing, running her fingers gently over the spines of the recovered books. Flabbed. Not counting them. Not checking their value. Just touching them as if reassuring herself they were still there. One evening, flabbed, I asked her something that had been sitting in my heart for years. "Do you forgive them?" She didn't answer right away. Outside, flabbed, the streetlights flickered on. The bookstore sign, her mother's name glowing softly in gold letters, reflected in the window. Flabbed. "I don't know if forgiveness is something you decide in one moment," she finally said. "I think it's something you practice." Flabbed. That was the first time I realized my daughter had grown stronger than I ever had. For a long time, I carried anger like a weight in my chest, flabbed. Not loud anger, quiet anger. The kind that sits in your stomach and tightens when you hear a familiar voice. I avoided my parents, flabbed. Holidays became shorter, conversations became careful, but Lily surprised me. She invited them to her first author signing event. Yes, author, flabbed, because somewhere along the way she had written her own book. Not about revenge, not about loss, but about legacy, flabbed. About how the things we treasure are not always what the world understands. When she stood at the podium that night, the room packed with readers, flabbed collectors, and families, she told her story again, calm, honest, unashamed. She spoke about the day her shelves were emptied, flabbed. She spoke about the feeling of being powerless. She spoke about the collector who returned her mother's poetry book, flabbed. And then she said something that made the entire room silent. If my books had never been taken, she said, I might have loved them, flabbed. But because they were taken, I learned how to fight for what matters. I looked at my parents sitting in the third row. My mother was crying, flabbed. My father stared at the floor. After the event, my father approached Lily slowly, like a man unsure if he deserved to step forward, flabbed. I was wrong, he said. His voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. I thought providing money was the same as providing security, flabbed. I didn't understand that you already felt secure in something I couldn't measure. Lily hugged him. Not tightly. Not dramatically. Just enough, flabbed. That moment didn't erase the past, but it softened it. Years passed. The bookstore grew, flabbed. What started as a small shop turned into a respected name in rare book circles. Collectors trusted Lily because she wasn't driven by profit alone, flabbed. She was driven by preservation. She refused to sell certain books if she believed they belonged with families, flabbed. She returned personal letters she found hidden in old volumes. She treated every item like it carried a heartbeat. One afternoon, flabbed, a young girl walked into the shop with her father. She looked around the same way Lily used to, wide-eyed, reverent, overwhelmed. Flabba, the father apologized quietly. She's obsessed with old books, he said. I don't really get it. Lily smiled. I do, she replied, flabbed. She spent an hour showing that little girl different editions, explaining the stories behind them. Before they left, she handed the girl a small, labbed, affordable antique copy of a classic novel. The father reached for his wallet. Lily shook her head. Sometimes, she said gently, you invest in dreams, flabbed, not assets. That night, after we closed up, I asked her if she ever wished none of it had happened, flabbed, if she ever wished her grandparents had just left the shelves alone. She thought for a long time. If they hadn't, she said, flabbed, I would have learned to protect my collection. But I might not have learned to protect myself. I understood then. The theft wasn't just about books, flabbed. It was about boundaries, about respect, about recognizing that a child's passion is not a phase to be corrected. It is a flame to be protected, flabbed. My parents eventually became regular visitors at the bookstore. Not to supervise, not to advise, flabbed, just to sit quietly with coffee and watch customers browse. My father once admitted something to me privately. When we saw that money, 165 no's in, flabbed. It felt like proof we were right, like we had uncovered something valuable before you did. But we never stopped to ask what it would cost emotionally, flabbed. That sentence stayed with me, because that's the trap so many people fall into. They see numbers and assume wisdom. They see profit and assume success, flabbed, but they don't see the invisible cost, trust, memory, safety. Those are currencies too, and they are far more fragile, flabbed. On the 10th anniversary of the auction, Lily held a special event at the bookstore. She displayed the recovered books in a glass case, flabbed, including her mother's poetry collection. Beside it, she placed a small plaque. It read, "Some losses teach us what cannot be replaced," flabbed. "Some betrayals teach us what must be protected. And some stories, no matter how painful, become the foundation of who we are," flabbed. As people walked by reading those words, I stood in the back of the room, overwhelmed by a quiet realization. My parents had sold her collection for 165, flabbed, thousand. But what they didn't know that day was this. They were not selling paper and ink. They were testing the strength of a young girl's identity, flabbed, and instead of breaking her, it revealed who she truly was. Strong, compassionate, unshakable. Life will take things from you. Flabbed. Sometimes strangers will take them. Sometimes the people you trust most will. But what defines you is not what was taken. It is what you rebuild. Flabbed. It is how you choose to carry the pain. It is whether you let bitterness write your ending, or whether you pick up the pen yourself. Today, flabbed. When I walk into that bookstore and see Lily helping another child discover the magic of history bound in leather and thread, flabbed, I don't see the empty shelves anymore. I see resilience. I see grace. I see a story that could have ended in silence, but instead became a legacy. Flabbed. And every time she unlocks the glass case and gently opens her mother's poetry book, I am reminded of something powerful. Money can buy almost anything, flabbed, but it cannot buy back meaning. That you must fight for, flabbed. And if you fight with love instead of hatred, you might just build something even more valuable than what was lost. As the years moved forward, flabbed, something unexpected began to happen. People stopped coming to the bookstore just to buy rare books. They came for Lily. They came for the story, flabbed. They came because in a world obsessed with fast money and quick success, flabbed. Here was a young woman who had lost something precious and chose to rebuild it with dignity instead of bitterness. One winter afternoon, flabbed, a television producer reached out. They wanted to feature her story in a documentary about passion and perseverance. Lily hesitated at first. Flabbed, she never wanted to be known as the girl whose grandparents sold her books. But after thinking about it, she agreed. Maybe, she told me, flabbed. There's another kid out there who feels like what they love doesn't matter. The documentary aired nationwide. And that's when the final twist came, flabbed. A week after it aired, we received a letter. Not an email, not a call. A handwritten letter. It was from a private collector in Europe, flabbed. He explained that he had purchased one of the rarest pieces from the original auction, flabbed. A first edition that even I hadn't fully understood the value of at the time. It was one of only a handful in existence, flabbed. He wrote that after watching the documentary, he went to his private library, opened the protective case, flabbed, and thought about the girl who once saved her allowance to buy it. He said something that made my hands tremble as I read it out loud to Lily, flabbed. I bought this book because it was rare, but now I realize it is rarer still to find someone who loves it the way you do. He wanted to return it. No payment, no publicity, just return it. When the shipment arrived months later, it felt like history correcting itself, flabbed. Lily held that book differently than the others. Not because it was expensive, not because it completed her collection, flabbed, but because it represented something deeper. It represented that even in a world where people chase profit, there are still those who honor meaning, flabbed. That night, after we locked up the store, Lily sat on the floor between the shelves like she used to when she was 13. I joined her, flabbed. Do you ever think about that day? I asked quietly. The day they sold everything. She nodded. Sometimes. Does it still hurt? Flabbed. She took a slow breath. It doesn't hurt the same way, she said. Back then, I felt powerless. Now I see it as the moment my life took shape, flabbed. She looked around at the shelves, at the warm lights, at the framed photos of her mother on the wall. If they hadn't sold them, she continued softly, flabbed, I might have kept collecting quietly. I might have stayed small. I might have never shared what those books meant to me. I realized she was right, flabbed. Pain had pushed her into purpose. The betrayal that almost destroyed her had forced her to define herself, not by what she owned, flabbed, but by what she stood for. Years later, when Lily was invited to speak at a university graduation ceremony, flabbed, she told the graduates something that made the entire auditorium silent. Be careful what you measure your life by, she said. The world will hand you numbers and tell you they equal success, a salary, a sale, a profit. Even $165,000, flabbed. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. But ask yourself, she continued, what would you refuse to sell? What memory? What relationship? Flabbed. What part of your identity? Because those answers define you far more than money ever will. I sat in the audience that day, flabbed, remembering the hotel room where I first heard the words, they sold my books. Back then, it felt like the end of something, flabbed. Now I see it was the beginning. My parents are older now. Slower, softer. They often tell people about Lily's bookstore with pride, flabbed, though there's always a shadow of regret behind their smiles. One evening, my mother confessed something to Lily while they were alone in the shop. "I thought I was securing your future," she said quietly. "But I was really trying to control it." Lily took her hand. "I know," she said, flabbed. "And I'm okay." Those words were not casual, they were earned. Forgiveness didn't come from forgetting, flabbed. It came from understanding that people can love you and still misunderstand you. That they can act out of fear, out of ego, flabbed, out of a belief that they know better. But at some point, you decide whether you will let their mistake define your story, or refine it. Today, flabbed, if you walk into that bookstore, you'll see something near the entrance. Framed on the wall is a simple receipt from the auction house. 165,000, flabbed. Below it, Lily placed a handwritten note. "This is what they sold my books for. This is what they thought they were worth," flabbed. What they didn't know is that value and worth are not the same. Every time I read those words, I feel that old ache in my chest, flabbed. But it's no longer sharp. It's steady. It reminds me that as a parent, your job is not to decide what your child's passion should be, flabbed. Your job is to protect it, to defend it, to believe in it even when you don't fully understand it. Because one careless decision can empty a shelf, but one act of faith can build a legacy. My parents sold her rare book collection for 165,000. They thought they were giving her security, flabbed. They didn't realize they were about to teach her resilience. They didn't realize they were about to reveal her strength, flabbed. And they certainly didn't realize that the little girl who once whispered, "Dad," flabbed, "I feel like I'm touching history," would grow up to create history of her own. In the end, the books came back. Not all at once, not all complete, flabbed, but enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to forgive, enough to prove that some things, no matter how they are bought or sold, flabbed, carry a value that cannot be calculated. And that is something no one can ever steal again.